The system informed our hero that the wave was over and more than 2.5 thousand enemies had been killed. Also unlocked a new achievement, Kobold Killer. All stats are upgraded by 5. Received 500 achievement points. He hesitated, for he had expected much more. Achievement points will go to all characteristics. However, if you master various skills through multiclassing and gluttony, then the stats will increase indefinitely. During the wave, our hero proved himself the best. Therefore, he is the first to receive his reward in the form of a glowing magical cube with a valuable item hidden inside. The second, a girl we already knew named Haru. She was very surprised to receive such a large gift. But even more surprising was Vulcan, who distinguished himself third out of all of them. He got his award too. However, the young man immediately asked him to give up his reward because he had no use for it. Vulcan agreed. Still, a spiritual soldier can't do anything with this valuable item. But unexpectedly, Haru reached forward and extended her reward as a shared future and gratitude. For a second, the protagonist wondered if it was worth taking her offering, and he immediately decided he would refuse because he had been betrayed before. He stated to her that she could go with him, but he didn't trust her yet, especially since the reward for second place in the wave is too great to take it away from the girl without a drop of regret. The necromancer informed her that he did not want to face betrayal again. The girl was worth proving she could be trusted. Otherwise, they'd better split up. Haru lowered her gaze and wondered what she should do in such a situation. And in the next instant, she activated her magic center to retrieve the hidden item. Much to the surprise of our hero and Vulcan, she showed her goblin mask to the light and was ready to give it to our hero, along with the reward for the battle with the kobolds earlier. Her actions could not be believed by Vulcan, for this was incredible generosity on her part. And yet, our protagonist realized that the mask contained all of the goblin's power, and they only give it to their one partner they can trust. Already holding this rare item in her hand, our hero asked Haru why she had decided to give it away. The girl immediately replied that it was a thank you for the fact that they had already saved her twice. And it's also proof that there's no way she'd give them up. However, our hero replied to her that this mask was worth a lot more than she might think. It seems like there must be some other reason for what she did. Haru immediately uttered the word revenge. Our hero interrogated her as to what she meant by the word revenge. The girl replied that she had not gone into details earlier, but her village had been burned down. She tried to find survivors, but she couldn't find anyone. She must have been the last goblin. At this phrase, the girl finished her story, while our hero and the Vulcan listened to her very attentively. After which Haru emotionally added that since she was the only survivor, she should avenge her king's death. So she asks permission to stay with our hero and his faithful servant. Now the nature of her act was clear to our hero. As a sign of deep respect, the girl made a bend and stretched her hands forward, in which she held the award she had received earlier. Our hero thought they were very much alike, for revenge unites them in their fight against enemies of the past. The young man immediately reached out to take the gift and told her that if she betrayed him, he would immediately kill her. He now had all 3 awards after this battle, as well as the rare goblin mask. He assured the girl not to attach too much importance to it. She was very excited and called him brother. The young man almost dropped all his gifts out of surprise, but he immediately accepted her address to himself with the word. With a sharp movement of his hand, the necromancer tossed these rewards high into the air to turn them into valuable items. Now each of those cubes has become something special. The first was the mana ring. This ring gave a +5 to total mana, as well as a reduction in mana absorption, +10%. The second die turned into a mana earring. It gave a +5 to mana, as well as a reduction in mana absorption, +15%. The third cube turned into a mana necklace. This necklace gave a +5 to total mana, as well as a 20% reduction in mana absorption. Vulcan remarked that these were splendid honors, though the girl did not share his enthusiasm. According to her, the mana was nothing of interest. But our hero's spiritual soldier explained to Haru that these things are perfect for necromancers who use mana to create their army. Thanks to such items, the protagonist will be able to increase the number and quality of soldiers by 45%. After the protagonist put on all the awards, he turned to Boone. which was still silent, and our hero was waiting for some sort of system notification from him. Boone was a demon watching death, and he offers to take our hero to another place. This other place was a settlement, or rather an inn, into which our heroes entered. It was empty. According to our main character, the people either escaped into the forest or went to the second floor of the tower. Nevertheless, the young man was expecting something special from this demon, something he had promised him earlier. He couldn't wait to see his reward, and in the next second, a huge energy pillar appeared on the table right in front of him, and as if some incredible object fell from the sky, which was a ring that emitted streams of magical energy around itself. To our hero's great joy, he felt that luck was on his side today. As he held this ring in his hands, he realized that it was an incredibly valuable item. After all, it could be used to harness demonic energy. Our hero could not believe such great luck and was greatly surprised. Vulcan was also very surprised and questioned his master as to whether this ring could really emit demonic energy. Although demonic energy was the privilege of demons, however, a ring of dark power could be used to generate it if worn. There were also certain restrictions. Demonic energy gave a +10 to characteristics when combined with another title or items. It was an incredible power that could be used as a resource for mana. Usually, to get demonic energy you have to become a slave of the devil. Then it will start to gradually transfer into the body. At least with one such ring, the power was incredibly increased. Now our hero has activated the main window of information with all his characteristics. His class was the spiritual master, the subclass was the multi-class. His main talent was mana. Aside from the basic stats that had increased greatly, he now had a demonic energy of 10. A new system notification informed him that the same demon that had given him that ring earlier was offering a handshake. Without thinking long, the young man extended his hand, doing a sort of virtual handshake. Great, he thought, for such a thing he could forget all his pranks. Events like this were a very happy moment for our entire team. Vulcan and the girl praised him, for now, in their opinion, he was ready to conquer the tower. However, there was someone else who was left out in this situation. Being slightly displeased, the evil lord burned with jealousy, and he was angry. He also offered a handshake. He held out his hand and waved to our hero, but the young man turned his back in his direction and replied that just offering a handshake was not a good idea. He could have gotten him some sort of gift before doing this. Vulcan looked at the young man in surprise. Did he really want to rip off the demon? He was definitely out of his mind. Now, by the endless sounds of notifications from the evil lord, it was clear that he was trying to find something to offer our hero. But it seems MC was already tired of all these alerts. The evil lord thought for a while, and in the next second suggested our hero create a new mission. The protagonist took this information happily, though he was greatly surprised. All eyes were fixed on the notice, for the evil lord had said that he would create a special mission for them. In Vulcan's opinion, this was their chance, as a mission from a demon was extremely rare. As if doing a favor, our hero covered his eyes and declared that he was accepting the mission. However, the evil overlord replied that it wasn't the mission itself that was his intention. Well, in that case, he might not have created it, replied our hero to him. But the evil overlord informed the young man that this is not how things are done. He shook his head because it was too late to change his mind. And now we know what the quest was. The evil Lord Ball gives you a mission. Terms and conditions. Become famous before you reach the 100th level. Punishment for failure. Becoming an apostle of Ball. Performance reward. Ball will grant you anything you want. Contract fee. Handshake with Ball. For the protagonist, it was a great fortune, because he could get anything he wanted. With a gift like that, he's got a mountain to climb. However, the terms are not so simple. If the mission fails, he will become the apostle of this demon. But our hero can't pass up such a chance. Extending his hand forward as if to offer him a virtual handshake, he firmly pronounced that he was accepting the assignment. It seems that the Lord of Evil was also out of joy and also shook hands with our hero, albeit virtually. Leaving this tavern, the girl asked her friend what he was going to do now. Maybe go to the second floor. However, he replied to her that they should catch an idiot named Kim Sung-tae and get as much information out of him as possible. The young man instructed the volcano to find him. Suddenly, the spiritual master surprised his master, for he already had everything ready. He had previously assigned his spiritual soldier to this character. So even though this Cretan is already pretty far away, Vulcan is still pretty sure he's on the first floor. They'll be able to find him quickly. After which Vulcan immediately disappeared into the magical vortex and said goodbye that he would be back soon. The protagonist suggested Haryu to talk on the way, as he was curious to know more about this unique mask. And while our heroes were on the road to their new destination, the girl told us that the mask allows us to use the goblin's abilities. Looking at the item, the young man wondered if she was referring to supernatural powers and charms. Haryu nodded her head affirmatively, after which she added that she could use not only supernatural powers, but also providence, that is, the gift that allowed her to predict the future. But the young man didn't seem to understand her words and took this information without enthusiasm. In his opinion, it would be better if her abilities could be used on the battlefield. But Haryu looked at him strangely at this time. Our hero thought that maybe there was something wrong with him. But the girl replied that to her he was just some really weird guy. People from all corners of the world traveled a long way to find someone with such special abilities to predict the future. And these wanderers approached many sages with a request to pass on this unique gift of conducting. Many of these warriors, including the one our hero was looking for, were concerned about their future and tried to do everything they could to change their fate. The necromancer interrupted Haryu and said that in his opinion, there was no point in running away from fate. After all, if you disliked or bothered by something, you should get rid of it. In that case, in the girl's opinion, her ability would suit him even more. With her answer, she further puzzled our hero. But Haryu immediately added that her ability was battle foresight, meaning that this skill was ideal on the battlefield. In her opinion, she would be quite useful to our hero. With a smile, the girl looked in his direction, expecting a response. And in the next second, the young man threw himself on top of her and began to hug his new friend tightly. He was delighted at her words, to the great surprise of the girl, who had not at all thought he would act in this way. Our hero was very happy to hear her say that. He never stopped calling her the best, and said he was very pleased with her abilities. He recalled his enemies who had certain nicknames: Star Sword, Star Bow, Great Thief, Divine Spear. Now, if it comes to fighting them, he has a chance to defeat all these serious opponents. Haryu even blushed for a moment out of embarrassment, but our hero couldn't stop hugging her very tightly and telling her how much he was grateful that she was willing to help him. And all the while our sweet couple was cuddling so beautifully, the evil overlord was watching them and bantering like he was taking a picture. Our hero was furious at this notice and told Ball to stop following them and get out of here as soon as possible. The young man began to apologize for such an abrupt change of mood. However, the girl was delighted with his response and replied that she was very happy to help. The MC then took this mask in his hands and said that he would make this object fulfill all of Haryu's hopes. He would help her take revenge and carry out her plan. The handsome goblin was delighted at such nice words. She clenched her fists and hoped that together they could make it work. We move to the place where Vulcan found the man our protagonist has been searching for so long. Our master's faithful servant clamped this warrior's mouth shut so that he could not cry out and call for help. Now, all we had to do was wait for our hero. Vulcan couldn't wait to kill this upstart. It was very hard for him to keep his cool. He was eagerly waiting for the main character to show up. Finally, our sweet couple showed up, and the young man asked his slave how he had managed to catch this underdog. Very emotionally, Vulcan replied that he had waited too long for his master because there was still no way this warrior would settle down. Do they really understand how hard it was for him to keep from killing him? With a smile, the main character stated that this could work in their favor because they now had a quest from the demon. After all, if they managed to destroy the guilds influenced by the Pelin siblings, the chances of accomplishing this mission increase. In that case, isn't it time they all started moving towards the 10th floor? Grinning evilly, the young man was excited for what awaited them next. Meanwhile, in the safe zone of the 2nd floor, the gathered warriors in the downtown marketplace were discussing the rumors that had been circulating about who had handled this incredible wave. There seemed to be 2, or perhaps 3. But while they were talking, a magical portal appeared behind their backs, through which our hero and his friends came out. All present were very surprised and amazed at his appearance, because our hero had that very mask on his face. Now everyone knew his name. His name is Ghost Mask. The warriors immediately moved closer to him to ask their questions. They were interested in how he was able to overcome such a huge wave of monsters, and perhaps he was a member of some guild. They would also like to know his real name. But he realized that he shouldn't reveal his name yet, for the evil lord had given the assignment. One had to become famous as quickly as possible before he reached the 100th level, and in case of failure, he would become the apostle of the demon. Whereupon our hero looked in their direction and declared in a demonic voice that his name was Ghost Mask. Our heroes quickened their step, paying no attention to the questions of these novice players. One of those present in the square suspected our hero of committing a crime before he entered the tower. In fact, he believes there have been many instances of people going to this place to hide from justice. Our hero was well aware of the rumors that had risen. In the tower, many people hide their identity. He's sure he was able to get their attention with a wave of monsters and a goblin mask. The young man then commanded Vulcan that they should move on because they still had a lot to do. A moment later, they dissolved and disappeared, regardless of the cheers and shouts behind them that came from that crowd. All three immediately found themselves on the second floor in a small forest, and the system greeted them. Also, they should have completed the current quest before moving on to the next floor. It was necessary to fight the kobolds again, as well as defeat the kobold warriors. Throwing off his hood, the young man was sure they could handle anything now. He was preparing for another battle. Our hero ordered Vulcan to take up the task. He's been tasked with bringing all these kobolds here alive. If he wanted, he could take Haru with him. Our hero wanted to experiment with demonic energy and asked his servant to return as soon as possible. Already flying away, the Vulcan shouted loudly for him and dared not use his new power until he returned. He was intrigued. The girl asked the young man if it was possible to do the task in this manner, sending someone in his place. But he, exhaling deeply, replied that if she wanted, she could go off on her own to catch all those kobolds. He's not forcing it. After that, the protagonist got ready to practice with his new ring. The young man still couldn't believe that he could use demonic energy, but he was very curious to see what would come of it all. In the next second, he activated the ring, and huge streams of demonic energy began to fly in all directions. It was a special energy that belonged to one of the most powerful races. A small clot of purple color appeared in front of him. This was the very magical energy he wanted to try out. Suddenly, the girl warned our hero that a ferocious kobold had appeared in the bushes, ready to attack them. Without wasting any time, this monster rushed straight at our hero, much to his delight, because in the next second, the young man activated his ring and decided to try out his new power on this creature. He sent a stream of demonic energy straight into that kobold, but it seemed that the monster managed to dodge, much to the girl's surprise. However, the young man was certain that this was not the case, because a blow that strong simply couldn't help but do some damage. And in the next instant, the shoulder of this kobold, to his surprise, began to fall apart into small pieces, as if it had been frozen by liquid nitrogen. The girl couldn't believe her eyes. She didn't understand what was even going on here. Our hero cheerfully replied that demonic energy was a weapon that was incredibly powerful. Not everyone can withstand such an attack. In a moment, there was no trace of the kobold. The young man added that this happens to those who encounter such a powerful energy flow for the first time. It was inevitable, he said, but there was something else he wanted to do. He decided to put that energy and his spiritual powers to the test in creating a special soldier. In his opinion, it should have turned out to be an incredibly strong warrior. He combined two streams of energy, his soul and demonic energy. But in the next second, the combination began to tear him apart, and the energy was so strong he could barely stand and fight back. He decided to lower the energy density from 10 units to 1. And after a while, white glowing eyes began to emerge from this huge purple blob of energy that resembled the former kobold, but much stronger. To our hero's delight, he realized that his properly chosen proportion had worked perfectly and he had created an incredibly strong soldier. The girl rejoiced and praised him. I think he's got it now. But from the looks of it, it wasn't very easy. Our hero replied that on the contrary, it was too easy. After all, few people know how to control that kind of energy except demons. No one really knows how easy it was to actually use it. Meanwhile, Vulcan returned and marveled at what he saw before his eyes. Was it really created with demonic energy? He asked our hero. He was able to bring for our warrior a large number of live kobolds that were bound with ropes and sat obediently on the ground awaiting their fate. Vulcan continued to marvel at his master's abilities. After all, a spiritual soldier with demonic energy is honored to be called a demonic spiritual soldier. That expression seemed to please our hero, while Vulcan scrutinized his new soldier very closely. He continued to praise our hero, calling him his disciple. But in his mind, the protagonist thought that it was too difficult to use his energy every time he captured a soul. There seemed to be a different way to put those skills to use in combat. He looked at Vulcan and realized that in this case he didn't need to summon souls himself, as his servant was much better at it. He turned to him with a smile and said that Vulcan had far more experience in summoning souls than he did. His words made Vulcan blush with embarrassment. He was delighted at such compliments. At last he waited for his student to pay homage to his teacher. The young man was glad because Vulcan was able to both summon souls and command them during battle, which is quite valuable. But in the next second, Vulcan suddenly felt the manifestation of demonic energy on himself and cried out loudly, because our hero activated his ring and directed this flow directly into the center of his servant's chest. The young man looked at him happily and loudly said that if he filled his soul with demonic energy, the fighters he would summon would have to turn into spiritual demonic soldiers. After all, his soul is much stronger than kobolds, so our hero uses all the energy he has. A second later, a huge stream of demonic energy began to sweep through Vulcan, who was screaming loudly and uttering our hero's name, cursing him with every possible word. The girl watched from the side and was frightened, for it seemed to her that Vulcan would probably perish from such a powerful flow. But our hero assured her that the spiritual master would endure and stay alive. Meanwhile, Vulcan shouted in a demonic voice that if he survived, he would surely tear our hero to pieces and eat him for breakfast. The young man replied to him that in that case Vulcan should get to his level before committing what he had planned. If he becomes strong enough, only then will he be able to challenge him. He'll be very happy about it. After a moment, the incredible streams of energy began to intensify their rotation, and huge beams of light spread out in all directions. Seconds later, Vulcan appeared in a new form, much stronger and brighter than he had been before. To the delight of our hero, who realized that in front of him was his best spiritual soldier, namely Vulcan. But suddenly his servant announced in a quiet voice that his apprentice had made a mistake because he had created a being many times stronger than himself. Whereupon Vulcan laughed loudly and summoned all his spirit soldiers, who seemed about to attack our hero. But the necromancer was ready for it and applied his new goblin mask, because he realized that now he had a great chance to fight an equal opponent in strength. Vulcan shouted joyfully and loudly that he would now show him the soldiers he had longed to see, after which released a huge amount of these terrifying monsters. He commanded them to fly forward and attack our hero. But it seems that the young man was ready for their attack because he was wearing this amazing mask. The girl was delighted by his behavior because she realized that he had now activated her. He was able, thanks to his mask, to watch as the demonic spirit soldiers moved much slower than him. So he had a chance to attack them and disarm them. Maybe it's just his imagination, or it turns out that the girl might have seen things that way before, thanks to her mask. However, in the next second, our hero destroyed each of these spirit soldiers with swift blows, and the next second pounced on Vulcan to his great surprise. He struck him a powerful blow with his fist and stated that he was different now, though he had been called the Death Star before. The blow landed directly on Vulcan's head, who in the next instant fell to the ground with a huge rumble, even though he was a spiritual master. Removing his mask from his face, the young man told him in a still demonic voice that Vulcan should have calmed down and listened to his orders. After a while, when the dust and smoke had cleared after this blow, Vulcan uttered that he was rather hurt because it still hurt a lot after such a blow. The young man assured him that the attack that failed only worked on normal people, but now he wasn't just a person, but had hidden powers using that mask. The girl turned again to our hero, for she was extremely surprised. It seems her little brother had once again used the power of that mask. The young man replied that he had done just that, used the power of the goblin mask, because everything around him abruptly slowed down and seemed very slow, and it was as if he had become the most powerful fighter. But suddenly she interrupted him and said that it was just a side effect due to lack of experience. Her words angered him somewhat. How is that a side effect? He was just counting on her unique ability to slow down everything that was going on around her. The young man then asked her what the mask was for in that case. Haru replied to him that she had said earlier that the mask was needed for battle foresight, that is, to predict your opponent's strikes. With it, you can see the enemy's slowed actions and anticipate his next move. He immediately began to ask her in more detail how he could learn it, but she couldn't answer, because according to her she just took it and did it, and it worked itself out. Our hero smirked and realized that it seemed that this girl was considered a true genius even among goblins. It would be hard for her to train him, even if he asked her to. Haru interrupted his thoughts and asked the young man if he happened to be dizzy. He shook his head negatively. The thing was that if an inexperienced goblin used a special skill, he would experience a terrible headache or dizziness. It also applies to her. She can't use Providence whenever she wants. She was very worried about our hero, but he didn't seem to be able to activate that skill when he first wore that mask. Nevertheless, the girl believed that he would soon learn everything and be more deft with this valuable object. He thanked his friend for telling him how the item should actually be used. The whole time they were talking, Vulcan was sitting off to the side, feeling very sad. Suddenly, he was approached by our young attractive lady who seemed to want to take pity on him. After all, Haru understood his sad feelings and emotions. Vulcan immediately started hugging her and thanking her because she was the only one who took care of him in any way, unlike his idiot master. Quite unexpectedly, the girl said, she hadn't even thought of even that to praise him or cheer him up in any way. She merely wanted to let him know that more kobolds were needed to be brought in. After all, the protagonist asked for another one as soon as possible, and it must be done before he turns Vulcan's soul into a ball and consumes it. Those were his words. That is the words of our hero. After she was done, Vulcan was very upset because he had to do his lord's bidding once again. After a while, the system notified the young warrior that the mission was accomplished and he could successfully continue onward. Now that they had a new fine-tuned process, they continued to mop up one floor after another. The third floor was cleared. After a while, they were able to clear the fourth floor as well. In these ongoing duels, our hero used his ring and mask, while the girl aided him in his battles with her swift sword. However, her strange demonic smile was very disturbing. After a while, on the fifth floor, two warriors were having a conversation amongst themselves. Everyone was talking about some guy who called himself Ghost Mask. It seemed like it had already been 3 days since he had entered the forest on this floor. One of the warriors was well aware that after the fifth floor, the kind of monsters that would be difficult to deal with began because they were goblins with poison needles. And at this time, our hero, being in the forest, activated his magical abilities and expected some monster to attack him. The next second, one of these monsters exhaled a special poisoned arrow from its tube, which flew in the direction of our hero. But she didn't have time to reach her goal, because the next second she was stopped by the swift sword of our beauty. The girl looked at this monster with her demonic gaze and asked him why he dared to attack her little brother. Her words caused that goblin to be extremely afraid, but a moment later, the Vulcan spiritual warriors attacked the creature and instantly destroyed it. Vulcan praised the girl. She seems to have stopped that arrow just in time, because it was just about to hit our hero. But as she spoke, Vulcan noticed something odd. There was clearly something wrong here. Her wicked smile and demeanor seemed very suspicious. What the hell is going on here? It was a very frightening phenomenon, and Vulcan was frightened. For a while, Vulcan tried to find out if the girl was all right. But after a moment, she herself was afraid of what was happening. Why was she holding the sword and laughing all the time? But as soon as they had finished, our hero interrupted their conversation and said that he had almost finished his training, and it seems that they've waited too long for him. Turning around, he said with a smile that there would be a very large wave of monsters today. His two new companions wanted to know more. What monster wave is he talking about? After a while, they sat down in front of the fireplace. It was the 4th floor. They had gone to the 5th floor the night before. He explained to them that after the 5th floor, goblins will appear instead of kobolds, and he'll be able to get the Goblin Killer achievement. Haryu asked him if he really wanted to go and destroy the Monster Lord. However, Vulcan said that you can't just attack them from wherever you want. No one knows when or on which floor the Lord will appear. The hero went on to say that he had no intention of hunting the Goblin Lord. And is it really necessary? He happily shouted that he knew how to create an attack wave manually. His words caused great shock and surprise to the other 2 members of this team. Is he really going to create a wave of monsters by hand? According to Vulcan, if someone in the tower knew about it, they would use it immediately. But our hero replied that he found out about it by accident. I think it was between the 3rd and 4th floors when the necromancer climbed the tower. A crack appeared, and that's when he saw this method. Each floor had a special central area where all the monsters appeared. If you find it and direct your mana there, the monsters will appear just as they did during the wave. In Vulcan's opinion, someone must have gained quite a bit from this, since he knows about it. He was referring to our hero, of course. However, the young man replied that this was the first time he had done this. After all, monsters above level 300 are much stronger than goblins. And such a wave of monsters couldn't even be stopped by 4 great beings. Drawing a conclusion from the young man's words, Vulcan realized that he hadn't known about it when it could be used earlier. The young man replied that things were different now, and to become stronger, he must make as many waves as possible. After a while in the city, in a safe place, to the surprise of many of the warriors present, the ground began to shake beneath their feet. No one realized what was happening. One of those present looked in the direction where a large, oversized energy portal had appeared, and everyone realized that it was a wave of monsters about to attack. They never saw a wave on the 1st floor. The next second, a huge number of goblins ran in their direction, and everyone rushed to flee, for no one expected to see them in the village, for there was no warning. But these goblins weren't taking it lightly. They shot their poisoned arrows at the fleeing warriors, and one of the young men was hit. He fell to the ground and couldn't move. One of his friends tried to help him, but he knew full well that it was the goblin's paralytic poison and that his friend would not be able to move for a while. He had tried to save him, but now that these goblins were so close, he knew that they would be the end of him. He was very sorry, because he didn't even make it to the 10th floor. But in the next second, our hero suddenly appeared very close and was able to activate his demon ring. A huge stream of his powerful energy struck right in the middle of the street, sending up huge clouds of smoke and dust. With a stern voice, he told the young man that the uninjured warrior should carry his poisoned comrade to safety. The young man knew exactly who was standing before him. Before him was the ghost mask, the same warrior who was rumored to be so great. Standing in the middle of the huge crater, our hero could hear the crowd behind him discussing his appearance. No one could believe that he would face this wave alone. They all seemed to have been saved. That's exactly what our hero was counting on. He wanted to save everyone, because if they survive and spread as many rumors about him as possible, it will be to his advantage. After that, he cast his spell to make his demonic soldiers rise from the ashes and start fighting. Huge streams of energy and his monsters rained down on the goblins from all directions, further destroying them. However, Vulcan was furious because he was the one who created the soldiers and summoned them all for the current attack. Nevertheless, our hero ordered him to stop talking and create as many soldiers as possible. But the next second, they were greatly surprised by an explosion nearby. One of their soldiers had been destroyed. There seemed to be someone else who was able to kill that spirit demon soldier, and that someone was a spirit goblin who possessed a special magic torch. He could attack them and kill their spirit soldiers. Now, we had to get rid of him as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would not be able to carry out this raid. Meanwhile, Haryu climbed up to the roof of one of the buildings and watched the huge number of goblins that still remained through the energy portal. The next second, she quickly jumped down from the roof while holding her sword, and her face resembled a completely different young and beautiful face than before. She looked more like a demon. She set about destroying one goblin after another, delivering her blows quickly. so fast that they had no chance to defend themselves, let alone attack her. The Vulcan immediately rejoiced, realizing that they seemed to have a chance. But the very next second, he was a bit puzzled because the girl was moving too fast. Our hero seized the moment and activated his gluttony skill to devour the soul of one of the dead goblins that could destroy his ghost soldiers. The young man was very upset because the fire had an amazing effect on his army. Now, using his techniques on such goblins was a futile endeavor. He had to think of something to inflict as much defeat as possible on all those goblins. Thanks to the absorbed soul, he activated a special spiritual fire that sent a huge wave towards them and began to destroy goblins one by one. Suddenly, a girl stood beside him, and he thanked Haryu for her great work and told her to keep it up. But this was not the girl he had met before. She had a strange smile on her face, and our hero realized that something was happening to her. After a moment, she showed her red sword, red hot from the many goblins she had already humiliated. With a terrible whirlwind of fire, she went into the next battle, bringing death to all present. Our hero had to cover himself with his hand because her sword emitted too much light. He knew it was a difficult item, but he had no idea it was such a powerful way to fight. Suddenly, his eyes widened in surprise because it seemed that this girl was no longer the girl he knew before. She was transforming into some kind of strong demonic warrior who had incredible power thanks to this weapon. He called her name out loud and couldn't believe his eyes. But the girl looked at him with her strange, fearful gaze, causing even more horror. And in the next second, thanks to her sword, she made two powerful strikes. It was like a laser cutting through the entire space around her. Her blow almost destroyed our hero. Her blows were so powerful and swift that they sliced every structure in the area like butter. And in the next instant, parts of these houses began to collapse into the street, where a large number of goblins were concentrated. To their great horror, they realized that they were about to be destroyed as these huge chunks of houses began to fall on them with a tremendous rumble. She managed to destroy an entire village in an instant, and our hero barely escaped the attack. What the hell was going on? He didn't understand at all. After that, our hero looked at the girl holding the weapon and realized that she was not the Haryu he knew before. But she didn't think to stop and attacked our hero in the next second. He barely managed to dodge the powerful assault. A moment later, there was a huge explosion as her weapon managed to hit one of the nearby trees. The young man kept shouting that it was him, her friend. Why doesn't she recognize him? But the girl paid no attention to his words and continued to attack, swinging her red sword. He defended himself because he didn't want to die. However, he noticed that she was very strong and could literally destroy him in the next second. The girl took another leap and swung her sword, once again destroying a large part of the house next door. A Vulcan was heading their way. He made his path through those great thick clouds of ash and dust, trying to find his master and the girl. A moment later, he found our hero sitting on the ruins of some house and came to his senses. Our protagonist seemed to be at a loss for a while and could not answer anything. He was a bit bruised. To Vulcan's delight, his master was fine. Now he asked about the girl. What was wrong with her? The young man answered that she almost killed him with her punch. Suddenly, Haryu appeared in front of them, holding her sword. It felt like it was the goblin leader, for she possessed incredible strength. The girl continued to smile broadly and stare at our hero with her demonic gaze. By this time, most of the monsters were already dead, and it seemed as if the flood had stopped. The protagonist ordered Vulcan to take care of the others while he grabbed his own weapon. He put on a mask and was about to deal with Haryu. He sharply pushed off the ground with his foot and rushed forward to attack. He was now able to activate Fighting Providence, and through the mask he saw her in a completely different light. The intuition he had developed while climbing to the 599th floor told him that her sword was very dangerous. It will simply cut him to pieces. Now that he realizes that there are no eternal friends or enemies in the tower, he had only one chance to destroy this girl. Surely a very sad story, but it looks like he has to say goodbye. He apologized to himself, and in the next moment he tried to strike. It was aimed directly at her head, but the young man still had his doubts, for she once again appeared before his eyes in the form he had known before. But in the next second, His strike was stopped by the girl's hand. How could she do that? The young man did not understand at all, for he had used all of his strength. Does she also possess something incredible even though she doesn't have a mask? She looked at him with a smile, and he realized that she had used her battle providence to anticipate his attack. She laughed, hit him with her weapon, and threw him aside. Now our hero was bleeding from his chest, so he didn't wait for her to finish him off and ordered his spiritual soldiers to attack her. The huge bony arms of the undead began to rise from the ground, and in the next second they began to assault the girl. It was the dead goblins who tried to grab her and stop her. However, after a moment, Haryu's eyes began to shine even brighter, and she easily destroyed all of those ghost warriors. To the horror of our protagonist, he didn't even see a single blow from his own soldiers. Was she also using that martial providence she spoke of earlier? Now he realizes that she is too strong, but he doesn't understand how to defeat her. There was another explosion that carried our hero a long way. He started to fall down that huge building. However, he was able to pull himself together in time and realized that he could only defeat this strong opponent with cunning. Something was clearly wrong with her. She seemed somehow tired now. Perhaps she was exhausted and had lost her strength. Her eyes were bleeding, and she was sobbing for some reason. Our hero seemed to realize that this was the side effect she was talking about. Now he might have a chance to defeat her. He just had to make sure that she couldn't use her battle providence and continue to wear her down. So he decided to try a trick and jumped through a broken window inside the building. The girl went after him. Angrily, she looked down and saw our hero there, happy to attack him again. He looked at her and offered her a fight. To our hero's great joy, Haryu immediately rushed down with her weapon. But as soon as she reached our hero, the young man summoned his ghost goblins, who began to attack the girl with poisoned arrows. At that moment, she had too little time to react to these zombie goblins. The protagonist was overjoyed at the fact that this paralyzing goblin poison could prove fatal to her. Would she really be able to dodge those blows without using her skill? Our hero watched as Haryu was about to be hit by 2 poison arrows. However, with a sharp move, the girl was able to kill 2 of the goblins and cut them in half. Much to the young man's dismay, his attack was unsuccessful. Wasting no time, Haryu attacked our hero in the next second. He barely had time to dodge before a powerful blow rang out near where he had been standing. The girl immediately pushed herself off the ground and flew towards him for another strike. Her face was pierced with a demonic look, and she laughed. It seemed as if she could have destroyed him in the next second, but at that moment, a poisonous arrow pierced her body. She was greatly surprised, not expecting such an attack at all, but it was a trick by our hero. After all, if it wasn't for the side effect of battle providence, he wouldn't have succeeded. The poisoned arrow that the zombie goblin released went through his cloak and hit the girl directly. It hit her from her blind spot, so she couldn't see anything. The girl started to lose consciousness and fell down from a great height. Our hero barely caught her in time to prevent her from hitting the stone floor. He could no longer feel his own hands as the paralyzing poison began to take effect. He asked one of his soldiers to bring him a poisoned arrow with a paralyzing toxin at the tip, and after a moment, he absorbed the venom into his body to resist this deadly weapon. Now that the girl was unconscious, he could look at her from the outside, and she posed no threat. However, her fighting ability began to get on our hero's nerves. At that time, Haryu saw a sword flying beside her in her mind. She didn't realize where she was. This world was different from the one we were used to. Someone's voice sounded close by, and a big hand grabbed the sword. A warrior appeared in front of her who was very happy to see the girl. It seemed to be the same demon who had given her the weapon earlier. He looked down at her and laughed, for she was just a child to him. The girl didn't know who he was. Maybe a goblin, maybe not. This character replied that she seemed to be right, and in the next second he moved as close to her as possible, positioning the blade of the weapon right next to her throat. He wanted to warn her of something. He said that the next time she showed her sword without training, he would simply eat her. A moment later, the girl woke up and found herself on our hero's back. To Vulcan's delight, she seemed to come to her senses. She didn't know where she was. But the young man explained that they had just left the 5th floor and reached the village. This was the safe zone of the 6th floor. She didn't understand why our hero was carrying her on his back, but he asked her with a smile if she didn't remember what happened the day before. It was very disappointing. They went to the hotel room, and he promised to tell her everything. They only had to check their equipment and stamina on the 6th floor before going straight to the 10th floor. In the tower on the 10th floor, there was a big city, and to enter it, they had to defeat a boss, the Great Orc Warrior. Haru nodded her head in agreement. Vulcan added that considering the creature's combat power, it could be considered a monster lord. Haru immediately added with a smile that once she recovered, they could set out to conquer this monster right away. But our hero said in a very stern tone that they wouldn't do that, because now everyone would have to go their own way. She did not believe his words, because they surprised her very much. How could he leave her now? But the young man was adamant in his decision, saying that he couldn't count on her after what happened on the 5th floor during the wave. Haru had absolutely no memory of what happened there. Eventually, her memories just faded away. Our hero reminded her that she had a demon sword, and the power of that weapon was incredible. However, although this sword gave incredible power, it also devoured its master's consciousness. She lost her mind and attacked him. After saying that, her eyes widened in surprise. Sitting on her bed, the young man added that if she continued to rely on such unpredictable power, she would not live to see the 100th floor. He decided to give her a task, without relying on the power of her weapon, to reach the 10th floor on her own. It seemed that it had dawned on Haru that she should become stronger instead of relying on the power of her weapons. She smiled happily and said that she would definitely follow his instructions. She promised to become strong enough to be his loyal battle companion once again. Smiling, our hero looked at her and nodded in agreement. After a while, they stood in the town square and were about to say goodbye to each other. The girl thanked our hero for letting her be with him all this time. Our hero added that she had absolutely nothing to rush off to because he still had some things to do. Therefore, Haru would have plenty of time to prepare and become much stronger. For a while, they looked at each other with a smile. The girl added that she would soon catch up to his strength and they would be together again. Our hero smiled and said that he would wait for that moment. They turned and went their separate ways. A few days later, on the 9th floor, our hero was able to fight a large number of goblins. Much to the dismay of one of them, he was attacked by a mysterious warrior wearing a strange mask, and this warrior was emitting an energy flow around his body. It turned out to be the floor boss. Our hero told him that he was just very big, but he was no different from an ordinary goblin. His eyes glowed brightly, and he ordered the monster to leave. And in the next second, the masked necromancer delivered a powerful knee to the creature's chest. The blow was so powerful that the monster fell to the ground with a loud thud. Vulcan could hardly believe his eyes. Our hero seems to have gotten the hang of it and can fight quite effectively. The young man didn't let him finish, as his main task was to suck out the souls of the dead. We needed as many demon soldiers as possible. It was an artificial wave created by our hero. Now that they were able to work together very efficiently, everyone enjoyed this activity. Is our hero really so cold-blooded? He hadn't even mentioned Haru in all this time, but the young man replied with a smile that he wouldn't have considered her as his ally if he thought she wouldn't be able to accomplish his task. She is strong, and so this girl will do anything for revenge. Now he ordered Vulcan to go about his business as usual and create as many orcs as possible. The current wave won't be enough. They need more soldiers. The tone of his request angered Vulcan, who began to shout angrily, saying that the young man had no respect for adults. He seemed to have no manners at all because he had no parents. Suddenly, our hero replied that it was true. He has no parents. His words made Vulcan look up in surprise. The young man explained that he was an orphan who grew up in an orphanage, and one of the warriors he knew grew up there, too. Vulcan thought for a moment. Then he approached our hero and put his hand on his shoulder as if to support his master. But our hero looked at him a little irritated, because he had not expected such a reaction from his subordinate. For a while, they argued about which feelings were worth showing to each other. After all, Vulcan wanted to take pity on him and hug him. But our hero did not like such emotions at all, so he tried to avoid such manifestations of his servant's feelings. Meanwhile, there was a notification that a new achievement, or killer, had been obtained. In a moment, The two of them were on the 10th floor. It was a test room. New system notification. Welcome to the 10th floor. He needs to defeat the boss to get to the middle of the floor. If he is defeated, he will be returned to the 9th floor. Vulcan was very surprised as he had never seen anything like this before. This was a new requirement. After a moment, the time in which the other heroes were able to kill this monster appeared in front of them. It was a badge of honor. The young man joked that he didn't see Vulcan's name on the record, but he replied that he didn't see the hero either. Half of the records on that list belonged to 4 great creatures. They were born with amazing abilities. With an Achillean smile, our hero declared that he was ready to break this record and that we should start right away. His words brought cheers from the Vulcans, for it sounded great. The system reported that the mission was being prepared and they should be ready for battle. In a minute, the battle with the main boss will begin. In our hero's opinion, it looked doable and he began to warm up. He asked Vulcan to use the demon soldiers to stop the boss. And in the next second, Vulcan started to prepare his army, summoning those big creatures to attack the forthcoming monster boss. Our hero slammed his hand down hard on the ground and activated magic spells, causing an incredibly powerful mighty spear to appear in front of him. Using the power of his multiclass, he began to cast spell after spell, activating all of his abilities to fight the giant monster. Even Vulcan was surprised at how strong our hero was. Each spell contributed to the fact that each new swirl of colored energy increased the power of Odin's spear. But the most important spell in this battle was the use of demonic energy on the ring. Now everything seemed to be ready, and our hero prepared to attack this monster that would appear any second. Our hero's army of demonic soldiers froze in anticipation and looked in the direction where this terrifying beast was about to appear. The system reported that the battle would begin in 3 seconds. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Mission launch. The great orc is summoned. With a tremendous rumble, something that size collapsed to the ground, sending rocks flying in all directions. The next second, as the smoke cleared, someone's big red eye looked directly at them. It was a monster of cyclopean proportions. Very strong and with a great big sword, it was ready to fight our heroes. Wasting no time, Vulcan sent his demonic soldiers in his direction, and they began to attack him, chaining his legs together to prevent him from moving. Our hero immediately used his spear. It was the spear of the god Odin, and in the next second, that spear flew straight at the orc, blowing his head off in an instant. The demon soldiers were still circling around the decapitated monster, while our hero stood in his usual relaxed pose, watching his defeated foe fall to the ground. The system reported that he was able to handle this monster in less than a second. The record was broken. He was the fastest to complete the 10th floor mission. He was asked for his name. Well, that's all he was waiting for. So he suggested the name Ghost Mask. He was then informed that the timesheet data had been updated. Data about this record began to circulate on the 8th floor. In one of the taverns where Haryu was sitting, all the heroes and warriors were watching the screens and couldn't believe that a record had been set on the 10th floor in less than a second. The girl saw a familiar name. All the while, the crowd kept discussing that it was the famous monster slayer. She took another sip from her cup and realized that she had to work harder to catch up with her little brother. At this point, Vulcan couldn't be happy with what they had accomplished because it was truly amazing. They surpassed the results of the great beings who had fought this monster before. He began to hug and praise our hero, for this was his disciple. Even great spiritual masters like him could not achieve such a good result. But standing at the magic portal, our hero calmly replied that they still had a lot of work to do on the 10th floor and they shouldn't waste time. Show must go on. The system informed him that they had reached the 10th floor, got the 10th floor achievement, +5 to all stats. A new auction was also started. An auction was a place where you could buy something for money. Meanwhile, someone tossed a gold coin into the air and looked at the information messages displayed on his screen. The young man read the name of the new hero, Ghost Mask, with a smile. He seemed to be preparing himself to meet this unknown character. Meanwhile, our heroes made it to the 10th floor. It was the first major city the Hodoks encountered, and in that vast city was a portal to Earth. People who had given up on reaching the top began to trade. and founded the largest city of the first 100 floors. Standing at a special screen in one of the shops, our hero decided to sell the remaining items and buy some magic potions for future battles. Vulcan noticed that the townspeople have lifted the ban on auctions, but the town's market is still thriving. That was a bit surprising. The protagonist added that there were people here who lived normal lives, but everything could be bought at auction. The system informed him that his registration for the auction had been approved. They walked down long streets along large shopping rows. Many merchants greeted them and offered to buy various products. From the Golden Lich, among other things, it was a weapon. It was also one of the hotels owned by the Golden Lich. Vulcan turned to our hero. He had no idea who this Golden Lich was. The young man explained that Golden Lich's company was one of the best in the tower. It had appeared a few years ago, and the Golden Lich was the richest man in the tower. No one knew his real name, but he had an incredible amount of gold. It is said that everything in the tower came through him. At this point, Vulcan was a little misunderstood by his master, for he seemed to have some business to attend to. But the young man replied with a smile that he wanted to find a sponsor, while carrying a huge bag full of precious coins on his shoulder. Vulcan didn't understand the sponsor in question, but our hero replied immediately, pointing up with his finger that he was looking at him right now. All these emblems belonged to the sponsor he wanted for himself, the Golden Lich. His words struck Vulcan so hard that he couldn't believe it and began to shout loudly that their sponsor turned out to be this particular rich man. Our hero replied with a smile that that was exactly what it was, because according to him, the Golden Lich would be his first sponsor. After a while, they entered one of the fancy rooms, which was very richly decorated. A lovely girl greeted them at the entrance, saying she was very happy to see them in the company of the Golden Lich. And everything that money could buy, weapons, items, potions, and information, was here. Everything can be bought and sold at the Golden Lich Company. That's what our hero needed. He was put on a waiting list. Number 18. It was what was needed. After a while, our hero was invited by one of the salesmen in charge of the third counter. He asked how he could help. Our hero put his sack in front of the salesman and said that he wanted to buy something. The salesman asked for the customer's name. At this point, the young man pulled out his mask. He looked in his direction and wondered if the salesman didn't know who he was talking about. The salesman's eyes widened in surprise. Now he realized that the one in front of him was the same ghost mask. But our hero interrupted him and told him to be quiet. After all, the merchant must realize that he is not wearing a mask in this room for no reason. After a moment, they began to talk and count the money our hero had brought with him. There were exactly 3,000 gold coins in that bag. This was all the money he had earned from the monster waves. Not understanding our hero's mission, the shopkeeper asked what he was going to buy with all that money. The young man replied that he wanted to buy a meeting with Golden Lich, the head of the company. His words stunned the salesman, who broke into a cold sweat. Does he really think he can meet with the head of the company? He just lost his mind. But our hero didn't understand his feelings. Maybe something's wrong? After all, it seemed like you could buy anything here. However, the salesman told him that he was sorry, but this transaction was not possible. He added that there were two reasons for this. One was that Mr. Leach was very busy, but the second reason interested our hero more. Still in a cold sweat, the salesman added that he might sound rude. But our hero did not bring enough money. 3,000 gold coins is not a small amount of money, but it was not worth his boss's time. Our hero thought for a moment. Maybe his plan will fail, but he had a new idea. The merchant did not have time to finish his apology, and our hero had to leave. But suddenly, the necromancer interrupted him, glanced in his direction with a sarcastic look, and asked for a meeting with the manager. He was willing to pay. A moment later, our hero and his spiritual servant began climbing the stairs to the second floor of this luxurious mansion. Vulcan appreciated his master's boldness in asking an unknown employee to arrange a meeting with the CEO. But our hero replied that such audacity only played into his hands. If Vulcan had other ideas on how to arrange a meeting with the Golden Lich, he was willing to listen. Finally, they reached the right place. They stood at the entrance to an ornate room, the doors inlaid with gold and gems. Our hero knocked and said that Ghost Mask had come. He was immediately asked to come in. The young man opened the doors loudly and saw the manager sitting in the chair in front of him, waiting for him. The man introduced himself and said that he was the manager of Golden Lich's Branch 10. Puppeteer. He's looking forward to meeting our hero. Looking around this luxurious room, our hero noticed that the Golden Lich he was about to meet did not seem to be here. The manager added that this was because he would not be able to meet his owner for that kind of money. That was the answer our hero was expecting, and he said he was willing to do things a little differently. He asked the manager to call Golden Lich here, because when he saw him, he would want to sponsor him himself. The manager took a deep breath and thought about the fact that this young man still had the nerve to offer some deals. He got up from his chair and began to approach our hero. He had heard of him, of course, but he shouldn't have been so casual and spoken of his master in such an arrogant tone. And as he approached our hero, he was able to make a few magic passes with his hands, activating the puppet's ability. It seems that this manager can pull strings and manage people. He's sorry, but the young man will have to leave this place. But suddenly, our hero smiled and said that he actually had the nerve to talk about such a thing. And in the next second, with a sharp movement of his hand, he grabbed all the strings that were trying to control him. After all, this manager had as much bragging rights as he did, since he was able to work his magic on him. His actions caused a great shock to his opponent. After all, our hero was able to show off his ability to defeat Hodox from the 18th floor. But I think he's got something else up his sleeve. And in the next second, the manager reactivated his magical abilities. With a clap of his hands, they were transported to a completely unfamiliar room where there was nothing. The manager told our hero that he was sure it was the first time the young man had ever seen anything like it. It was the realm of the spirit, an infinite sphere, our hero added, separating the soul and spirit from the body. Once again, the manager was amazed at his opponent's knowledge. How did the 10th floor fighter know that? He shouldn't know about the realm of the spirit. In that case, since he knows what it is, he should realize that the laws of reality do not apply here. It was a dimension where you had to use all your experience and soul power to fight. After a moment, he activated his soldiers and said that if our hero could defeat him, he would try to arrange a meeting with the head of the company. A huge number of magical threads began to cover our hero's legs and arms, preventing him from moving. But these actions only made our protagonist laugh, who said that the manager was no enemy to him. In such a case, he was ready to show him all that he was capable of, if he used his experience and the strength of his soul. Our protagonist raised his arms to his side and loudly proclaimed that the manager hadn't yet realized that his skills didn't work on him. And in the next second, with a sharp movement, he cut all those threads. There wasn't even a trace of them left. Then he looked at his opponent and realized that he had exhausted all his abilities. The manager saw an incredible scene in front of him. His guest seemed to have the mental prowess of a fighter above the 100th level, maybe even the 200th level. However, he still had a hidden ace up his sleeve. He said with an evasive smile, realizing that he was on the same level as our hero. And with the magic snap of his fingers, the ground beneath our hero's feet began to tremble. Much to our hero's regret, a huge number of scary monster puppets began to rise from the water's surface, so many that they filled the entire room. He couldn't believe his eyes. They were puppets, a huge army of soldiers that this manager had raised with his skills. He immediately revived them and ordered them to attack our hero. Pointing his hands at the young man, he said that experience played an important role here. And it was through experience that he raised all those puppets. In order to break through the 100th floor, he reworked those puppets to make them stronger with mana transfer. They were improved puppets, and they were as strong as a 50th floor Hodok. With a demonic voice and a loud laugh, he said that once our hero enters this realm, the winner is immediately clear. And that winner would be him. In the next second, all those puppets rushed to attack. At the command of their master, they prepared to deal a mighty blow to our hero. And for a moment, he froze in fear, realizing that he would have a very difficult time now. A large number of these soldiers piled on our hero, forming a huge mountain, to the delight of this manager, who realized that this was the end of his enemy. As he left, he added with a smile that wounds in the spirit realm aren't reflected in the real world, so our hero needn't worry. After all, no one will notice that he's really dead. But suddenly, there was a strong splash of water behind his back. When he turned around, he saw that all his puppets were scattered to the side. It was real magic. After a moment, the shape of our hero changed, and he turned into the strongest necromancer, subjugating everything around him. The manager couldn't believe his eyes. Was it really the magic of the boss from the 100th floor? Now that all his puppets were destroyed, he realized that his plan had failed. He didn't have any more hidden abilities. Standing high above this manager, our hero told him that even in the realm of the spirit, it would take time to turn the dead. And now the puppet army was his army. And it seems that this manager had no idea what a real army was. But now it's time to see how they're all going to destroy him, thanks to our hero's incredible array of soldiers. Now our main character smiled and added that as soon as the manager hit the ball, the winner was immediately clear. This winner was our protagonist. The manager was terrified because his fate was sealed. He saw many powerful monsters from different floors in front of him, all on our hero's side. He didn't even know the names of some of them, while our hero laughed out loud and told him that he was the greatest necromancer. An intense fear gripped the manager, who realized that in front of him was an incredibly strong army of spiritual soldiers, as well as our main character, who posed the greatest threat to him. And in the next second, a huge number of magic arrows flew towards him. He shouted loudly, and a moment later they were back in the room from which they had traveled to the mind sphere. Kneeling before our hero, he didn't realize when they had time to return to that room, because he hadn't closed his orb, but it seems our hero had. This fact puzzled the manager even more, since his guest was able to take control of the mind sphere from him. However, our hero interrupted his train of thought and told him that he had had enough whining and demanded that he get up from the floor. Glancing in his direction, the necromancer asked in a stern voice if the manager had forgotten about the deal he had promised earlier. After all, he had to arrange a meeting with the Golden Lich, the head of the company. And in the next instant, the young man handed the manager a certain small envelope, a special letter. It asked to be delivered to the master. However, the manager added that he didn't want to talk about it since he had lost, but if his master didn't respond to this letter, he couldn't help. Smiling, our hero said not to worry, because as soon as the Golden Lich saw this letter, he would answer it himself. A short time later, Ghost Mask was standing outside, and the salesman and the manager were saying goodbye to him. They assured him that they would let him know as soon as they received an answer. They bowed their heads and wished our hero a safe journey. It was nearing sunset, and the sun was already setting. Seems like a good time to find a place to sleep and take a break. But our hero interrupted Vulcan and said they had tons of other things to do, and it was too early to rest. It wasn't worth wasting time sitting around waiting for the Golden Lich to answer. Since we're going to spend some time in this town, it would be worth it to work hard as guild members. So they decided to visit the location of the White Swallow Guild. It was the lobby on the first floor. Two girls standing at the front desk were talking to each other. One of them wondered how high her friend had climbed. The girl on the right replied that she had made it to the 57th floor. They continued to discuss the rewards they would receive for their new achievements and broken records. One of them could not understand why they had to stay in the lobby on the 10th floor. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. They couldn't understand what kind of idiot would break into a guild building that was under the protection of the Holy Realms. With a loud bang, our hero entered the room. The girls immediately changed their demeanor and declared that they were welcoming this traveler to a place called the White Swallow Guild. They inquired as to what had brought him here. Smiling, the young man explained that he had come to join the guild because it was very difficult to climb the tower alone.